Our speaker tonight is David Young, Federated.Computer. Give it up. He's going to tell us all about the company.
Thanks for having me. I hope I'm not disappointing. Actually, I don't want to talk about Federated.Computer. If you like what I'm going to talk about, then we will talk about Federated.Computer. But tonight, what I really want to talk about is this concept of digital freedom as it relates to open source software. And before I get there, I just want to give you a little bit of background on who I am. First and foremost, I'm a husband and a father. It's not up there, but I'm not running for political office, so you don't care about that. I'm an entrepreneur. I've founded a bunch of companies. I founded a company called Joyent. Joyent was the first cloud computing company, and that's the fact. We were before Amazon, we were before Azure, we were before Google Web Service, and we were the first one that on the internet, and I and a couple other guys, we were the first ones to offer you a virtual machine on the internet where you could give us a little money and we would spin up a data center for you. And at the time, the only people that are interested in a data center as a service, now everyone's interested in it, but at the time, the only people that would buy something like that were the pornographers. But you know, most of the people, this was in San Francisco, if we went to the Visas of the world and others, they said, we're never ever going to give you our stuff. We're never going to be on the cloud. We love our servers, blah, 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 blah. And now, I mean, there's actually sort of a countercultural movement going on in the cloud where people are coming back to running their own servers. And we could talk about that, but everything went to the cloud. This is an excursus, but almost like everything's going to AI right now. So, our industry is about extremes, over here, over there. We never sort of find equilibrium. Nevertheless, after Joyent, I left that, and I was so sick of computing, so sick of success, that I thought, and Joyent was sold to Samsung and now runs everything. If you have a Samsung phone or tablet, Joyent is behind all of that. And probably the deep state is behind that, but that's another conversation. But I was so sick of that in the cloud that I decided to start an ice cream company. And it was called Honeymoon Ice Cream. It's not up there, but it was premium ice cream in a glass. And I quickly discovered that being good at startups and software does not translate to being good in food. And food is probably one of the hardest businesses you can ever get into. So don't get into food. But the next thing is now I'm doing Federated.Computer, and we're going to talk a little bit about the foundational ideas behind it. I'm also a classics major, so I'm not your typical sort of tech person. Actually, I have a master's in ancient Greek. My focus was on a Greek poet called Pindar. I actually think everyone should do liberal arts before they do science, because liberal arts gives you the ability to think. And I used to be a very big advocate on trying to convince young kids in high school and college to give up their pre-law, pre-medicine, and go and learn how to think and write and think about ideas before they thought about, concrete principles and concrete laws of math and science. I'm a recent relocation person from California, the People's Republic of California, to, I guess, the People's Republic of Colorado these days. But that's the way it is. Moved from San Diego here to Colorado Springs. So far, so good. Yeah, we gave up the beach, but now we've got the Rocky Mountains. And I guess the final couple things is I really have found over time that I'm more and more a free speech absolutist. I think that it's important that people are given tools, and that's the reason I founded Joyent, because I wanted any company to be able to start and deliver its idea into the marketplace. The barrier was infrastructure. And so we made it easy for people to get infrastructure in the cloud. And now we're beginning to see, and we started to see this sort of, I don't know what happened in Silicon Valley, but Silicon Valley used to be about people that had ideas, and we brought ideas to market, and we wanted everyone to use our ideas. And somehow we woke up into this place where Silicon Valley is now about censorship and about managing ideas and managing who's in and who's out, and very sort of non-free speech absolutists. And so I've sort of become more and more of an advocate for that position. And then finally, what good software person isn't a ham? My call sign is Kilo 5 Delta Papa Yankee. So hopefully I'll hear you on the HF. So what is Federated.Computer? And this is really the only pitch I'm going to give you tonight, besides, as I said, the principles that underline and underscore Federated.Computer. Federated.Computer is a very simple idea, which is we take lots of great open source software, we package them, we integrate them as much as possible, and we deliver them to users so that they can adopt them. Now, for the most part, that hasn't been the case. If you wanted to use an open source package like, say, Nextcloud, which is groupware, you have to go find a server, you got to install it, you got to run it, you got to back it up, you got to make sure that Boris and Ling Wang and all the other people that are out there on the internet trying to grab your stuff can't get into your stuff and own your stuff and all that stuff. And it's very, very complicated. It's very, very difficult. So what happens? Most people don't use open source software. It's just too much. And what do they use? Well, we're going to talk about that. So Federated has this simple mission to make it very, very simple for small, medium businesses to adopt open source software to run their business. And I think this is a transformational idea because it's basically going back to what we just were talking about with regard to Silicon Valley. It's saying, look, there is an option. You don't have to use all the big tech. You actually can begin to use open source. By the way, if someone has a question or a rigorous objection to something I'm saying, just raise your hand and I'll call on you and we can sort of deal with it as it comes up. Now I have to ask this question because I was in this position myself, and that is, how many of us are digital hypocrites? We talk about openness, we talk about free speech absolutism, we don't want to have censorship. And I always like going to Bitcoin conferences and asking this question because they'll talk about, I'm a Bitcoin maximalist and freedom and no CBDC and fuck fiat and all the rest. Oh, here's my email. It's patrick@gmail.com. What's wrong with this picture? Or I'm going to send you my newsletter from the newsletter software service that throws me off if I start talking about guns. Or I start talking about this topic that's verboten for the industry. Do you see the problem? Now, I get it, because in the past, it's been very, very difficult to adopt tools that are truly open and truly allow for us to use the thinking and the concepts and the content that we want to use. But that's beginning to change, and Federated's really about changing that. Now, because it's, as you know where this is going, because it's open source, anyone can do what Federated is doing, and in fact, I hope that becomes the case. It's important, and I think in an audience like this, not much evidence is required, but it's important to sort of review at a very high level what our big tech overlords have been doing to us. So, in the case of Google, I think we all understand what Google does, which is they use our content, they use our attention. Does everyone know what that word attention means? That's like, who am I talking with? What are the pages that I'm looking at? What are my actions on the internet? Very, very important. And if you don't think it's important, then go talk to your credit agency, because your credit agency thinks it's important. Your medical insurance company now thinks it's important. I got a very sort of front row insight into this when I ran Joint, because we had a big partnership. Let's pretend we're at a Maoist convention here, and I'm going to come clean with you. At Joint, we had a big partnership with Facebook. Boo. And we had this partnership where we would offer free infrastructure for developers in exchange for the data. And it was amazing to me what we could learn about you, or you, or you. And so we would use this so that when you came over to, say, a Williams-Sonoma site, oh, your wife's pregnant, and you like poodles. I don't even know who this gentleman is, but I'm pointing at him. And we knew everything about the person. And we could, of course, it was harmless. It was harmless. We're just making Williams-Sonoma look like something that's going to be helpful to you. But then let's go further. Let's now begin to use that data, and let's aggregate it with data brokers and other sorts of things. And this was happening back then, but it's happening on steroids now. And let's sort of help them understand you as well. And maybe they're selling you copper-clad pots. Maybe they're selling you pots and pans and plates and glasses. But maybe they're also making decisions about your life and other sorts of things that you may or may not agree with. And you have absolutely no transparency into those decisions. That's what Google's doing. Zoom announced a few months ago that they were going to use all the conferences on Zoom to train their AI. And you say, well, okay, it's free. No. Free and paid. Any conference on Zoom is being used to train AI. Now you say, well, they're going to learn about my book club, or they're going to learn about this. But if you're a business and you have a trade secret or something like this, that's also being ingested into the AI, the large language model, the machine learning that's being used to train the AI. Microsoft is doing the same with ChatGPT. Dropbox is using it for all paid free, all the data that's on Dropbox. I'm happy to send you the footnotes for all these things. If you're interested, just reach out to me. People always get surprised by this, but Apple runs a $9 billion annual advertising business. Does anyone want to guess how they run a successful advertising business on the internet today? Yes, that's right. So Apple's doing it, Proton Mail's doing it. I talked about attention. They see who you're talking with. Yes, your message is encrypted, but they know that I sent a message to Leaf. And that's important information, and that gives a profile of me. If you're using, there's sort of a basic principle here. If you're using a centralized service, then they're looking at what you're doing, and they're, quote, learning from that. And so you've lost your privacy. And that's just sort of what you have to do today, or at least that's what you used to have to do today to be able to be on the internet. Now, at a high level, open source begins to solve this. Not entirely, and we're going to get into why that is. But first of all, it solves it because we're no longer using fiat software. So you're no longer trapped into the vendor's idea of what the software should do, what the data formats are, how you can use your data, can you get your data out. Sometimes you can get it out, but sometimes if you've got Google Files or Google Spreadsheets or other sorts of things, it's not interchangeable easily. So they put in a lot of barriers for entrance and exits. And then if they don't like your content or they don't like you, then you're screwed. And there's no flexibility. You can't run a Zoom somewhere else. You run it on Zoom. You run it to Zoom's principles. How many of you have ever read it's called a EULA, End User License Agreement? Yeah, and they're interesting. But if you get in there, they basically say, look, this is a service to you. We have no obligation, and everything you do on our service is our property. And in some ways, they have to do that. Why? Because if they don't do it that way, then they have obligations to you as a customer that are very difficult. It exposes them to a lot of legal liability. Now, the only way you could get out of something like that is basically by running it yourself. But as we've talked, up until now, you needed to be an IT services person to be able to do that. So the convenience, I get it, the convenience of running on these platforms is very, very attractive. And not just attractive, it's mind-blowing. Google Workplace is a really amazing piece of software. It works really well. But there's a price to be paid for it. The second sort of idea here, and this is coming off of Richard Stallman, who's one of the founders of the open source movement, is that thoughts themselves, if you think a little bit about what software is, software is just a bunch of words, a bunch of process commands, but it's sort of like me describing to Wyatt here, it's like, here's my script for a movie. Now it's an idea, but someone else could have the same idea for the caper. And what a proprietary software company is saying is like, that idea about the bank robbery, that's our idea. And you can't have that idea. In fact, we're going to go further and we're going to patent that. And we're going to say that all bank robbery movies are ours. Now, we might license it and allow other people to make bank robbery movies. But the idea of a bank robbery movie, we've patented it. It's ours. Get away, pay the bill. Now that's a silly concept, isn't it, for film? But that's exactly what goes on in proprietary software. And the reason they do it is because they have us captured. There's not been a way to get away from it. Now the interesting thing is, I'm not going to get into this a lot, but on the server, sort of behind the scenes of the way the whole internet works, this used to all be proprietary. As you can see from my hair and beard, I'm old enough to remember when if you bought a database, it came from a company called Oracle. You paid a lot of money for it. If you bought networking software, if you bought coding software, if you bought all these sorts of things, these tools, they used to all be proprietary. And open source really started by software engineers saying, let's build the tools ourselves for writing the stuff. And that's been very successful. And in fact, almost all the internet runs on open source, and no one pays for it. And so that sort of same principle is now beginning to come out to you customers, you consumers, so that there's great open source software that you can run if you have the skills and capability and attention to do it. I think we can also think of open source as sort of contributing to the common good, and not to get too philosophical here, but I think it's important, which is in an open source model, we are thinking about sort of the mutual gifts that we can all bring into the marketplace together, and what are the parts that we can cooperate together with, and what are the parts we're going to compete on. So in open source, I can go and the term that's used is called forking it, not in the sense of a three-pronged eating instrument, but sort of two forks in the road where I take open source code and I say, that's a great idea. I'm going to tweak it and so it's like jazz. It's like jazz music where it's like, that's a great line. That's a great bass line. I'm going to do that and reimagine that in a different way. And so consequently, you have a more full common good, a more full commons where everyone is participating and it will contribute. And then we compete maybe on the service, customer service, or strength of service, or speed of service, or other sorts of things that are not so much about the code itself, but about delivering the code to the people that are consuming it. And as I said, open source really runs 90% of the internet today. It's that last 1% of where we as consumers have to start to use these tools. Let's just talk, who's ever used Google Meet? Yeah, it's based on Jitsi, which is an open source tool, and they just rebranded it. And you could go on and on and on. And it's that last sort of 1% where they're saying, actually we're gonna fuck you, we're gonna screw you, here's the tax, and you're gonna have to do it our way. And that's just not right, in my opinion. Now, I'm not complaining about it. I could complain about it. Instead, I decided to start a company to fix it. So let's look at, just quickly, some of the benefits of open source for consumers. The first thing I think is obvious, which is privacy. Because it's open source, now this isn't always the case. I could run open source, and we just talked about Jitsi. I could run open source and do it in a way that doesn't respect privacy. But because you have the opportunity to do it somewhere else, actually there's an incentive in the market for those that are running these open source projects for consumers to do it in a way that respects their privacy and focuses on delivering service rather than stealing data for the purposes of training AI or training my advertising network. Now the next benefit of open source is flexibility. If a customer doesn't, and I was really psyched to find out that Wyatt's a customer. If Wyatt, I don't know if Wyatt's capable of doing this, but if Wyatt, well, he doesn't have to be. He could go hire an IT person. He says, Dave, I love this software, but I don't like you. It's like, well, Wyatt, here are your keys, and you guys get to go run it yourself. That's flexibility, and you can do that. I don't know if you knew that, but that's a possibility for you, Wyatt. And you don't get that if you're running Zoom. Try and call the Zoom helpline. By the way, don't just try and call the Zoom helpline to ask them this question. Try and call the Zoom helpline, because typically there is no helpline. It's one of the things that's different at Federated. We take our customers seriously, and we want to talk to them if they have problems. But if you can't run Zoom somewhere else, you just have to run Zoom on Zoom. And that is proprietary and fiat. The third thing is price. And so again, because we're competing, because there's competition, we all know this is good libertarians and market people, because there's competition, the price is going to be right-sized. It's going to be reasonable. Now, for Federated, this sort of turns into some eye-popping numbers. Typically, if you have a group of 5 people, a team of 5 people, and you're using like Google Workplace, Zoom, we have some CRM, we have some like a GitHub replacement, we have password management, we have all these sorts of things. That team of 5 will typically spend anywhere between $700 and $1,000 a month on our software stack, equivalent functionality. On Federated, that costs you $59 a month. Now that's amazing, but again, because we are bundling a service for customers, we're not writing all the software. We don't have the costs of the proprietary guys doing all that development, managing those prisons, those digital prisons. We're about freedom. So the price is right-sized. And I think over time, that becomes even more the case as there's more competition in the market. And I expect, Federated's not going to be the first that's going to do this, because there's so much opportunity out there. The fourth thing is security. This is a kind of a trope that gets run out there, but it really is true that, if you have a situation where everyone gets to inspect the locks are pretty good. And that's the case with open source, because everyone gets to inspect the code. It's not the case that there's never been problems, but they get fixed because it's out in the open and it's transparent. When you have proprietary code, no one knows what the problem is. And in fact, oftentimes not even the vendor knows what the problem is, because the vendor sort of wrote the code and said, I'm going to get rid of all my software engineers. I don't know if we have any software engineers that have worked for proprietary companies, but this is very common. Let's go over to India, we'll get this thing written, then we'll get rid of those guys, and then hopefully nothing happens. Well, that's not the model in open source, because we're constantly updating, we're constantly looking, we're constantly improving. And then the final thing is really speed. Because I don't have to put in features into my software that are about watching you and grabbing your data, then the software should run faster. Now, I'm not saying that all open source is always faster, but in general, typically speaking, open source is more efficient because it does what it needs to do, and that's all. If you need more features, you can do them. People contribute open source. And in fact, Federated, I'm going to show you a few of the products that we offer in Federated, but we contribute to some of those projects because we need them for our customers. But we don't contribute them just for us. We contribute them back to the open source project, so everyone benefits from that. So the question really remains, which is, and I don't know the answer because, for me, it took time. Why do we remain trapped? Why do we remain trapped using products that are abusing us when there are great products out there that give us similar functionality, if not better functionality, better price, more flexibility, all the rest of it. Why do we remain trapped? You know, part of it is just human nature. It's hard. You have to move. You have to change your behavior. Codependence, yeah. Yeah, there's some, well, and it's like, you know, this isn't the titanium gadget that everyone needs to show their status, you know, so, and I was one of those guys, you know, I needed to know that I had iPhone 14A, and you only have iPhone 12A, so I'm obviously a better person than you. So there's, you know, I'm not going to judge, it's not a question of judgment, it's just a question of sort of where we are. And the possibility of moving away from these digital prisons are not something that you have to do all at once. They can be little pieces that you can do bit by bit, but over time, you know, I've been Google free now for a couple of years, and it's a good feeling, you know, but it took time. I'm not going to deny it's not something that has happened. I've been Google free, I've been Apple free, I've been Dropbox free, and I had to learn some stuff, but now I'm free. And no one, you know, I don't wake up. I was just, before I came in here today, I just noticed that Google is now increasing the price of all business subscriptions by 20%. And everyone's complaining because there's been no improvement. Well, fuck you. Pay the 20%. Where are you gonna go, bitch? You know? That's a way of doing business, but that's not the open source way of doing business. So let's look at this, which is what's a good open source warrior starter kit. And I apologize to the people that find warrior to be a triggering word. But these are just some of the suggestions that you might want to explore. And I'll call up the ones that are part of Federated. We have a lot more that's in the $59 package that I mentioned, but the first one would be Nextcloud. Nextcloud is a German package. You find that the Europeans are really into this, in part because they don't like American software companies and they don't want their data owned by Americans. But they've been very good. In Nextcloud, I call out, there's a lot of places you can get Nextcloud. You don't have to just get it from Federated. But Nextcloud, think of it as your groupware, your project management, your spreadsheets. So it does, I'll get out of the way here, your spreadsheet, PowerPoint. In fact, this PowerPoint was created on Nextcloud. So it reads and writes Excel spreadsheets, Word files, PowerPoint files, all these sorts of things. And you can do a lot more. They even have AI. If you need a machine to tell you how to think, they can do that too. So the next project I want to highlight is a project called Jitsi. We talked about that a bit, which is video conferencing. It works great. We think it works even better on Federated because we've done a lot of work to make sure it's optimized. But it's video conferencing. And the cool thing about Jitsi, how many times have you wanted to call, I call up Leaf and I say, let's have a video conference. And he says, what's the 18-digit code that no one can ever remember at the end of a Zoom call, the code for the room? I don't know. On Jitsi, it's just jitsi.com/leaf. And it will always be that way. And we can remember. It's easy to remember. It's human-friendly. So I love Jitsi. The third one is a project called Element. If you've used Slack, Element is a lot like Slack, but it's completely free. It's completely open source. It's federated. Almost all these projects are federated. What do I mean by that? That means that if Wyatt has his installation, he's completely free and secure and individual, and he can talk to your installation, and you guys can talk to each other without sharing data, without sharing space. So it's kind of like email, but for all these other internet services. And so Element, if you want to reach me at Federated on Element, it's at david.matrix.federated.computer. And it's like an email address, and you can talk to me from your Element installation to mine, and it, quote, just works. I also like for desktop operating systems, and believe me, my father bought the first Mac in '84, so I've been a Mac person forever. System 5, System 6, System 7, blah, 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 all that stuff. But I really like Pop! OS. It's an easy-to-use Linux distribution. It's actually from a company. I've got one of their laptops here called System 76. They're out by the airport. So you'd be sponsoring. We all talk about, hey, buy local. Okay, let's buy local, Pop! OS. It's a great, easy to use. You don't have to be a systems administrator to use it. It works on every piece of hardware you can imagine. I mean, I've got a really old Mac laptop that's probably from 2013 that I use when I'm sitting on the couch watching boring Hallmark movies with my wife. And that runs Pop! OS. Works great. It's very performant. You say, well, gosh, I heard Linux doesn't run the software I need to run. Well, and this is not just me sort of trying to dick you over and say, hey, try it. Oops, yeah, you're right. Look, it won't run your Adobe products and some of that, but these days, there are ways for it to run. But these days, there are a lot of alternatives to the Adobe products like Inkscape for Illustrator, GIMP for Photoshop, that are really, really good and have come a long, long ways. So VLC for watching videos, OBS for broadcasting videos. You've got all the different stuff for reading and writing, Word files, Excel. So I got and Steam for games, on and on and on. I got off of Mac really at the end of 2018. I've never looked back. And I don't, it's in my control. It's just part of that thing. I'm free. I don't have to worry about Apple watching, oh, that's interesting, Dave doesn't like this, or Dave likes that. And now let's advertise to him in the App Store. I don't have to worry about someone looking over my shoulder. The same is true commonly, people will say, well, on the mobile device, you gotta be someone's bitch. But it's not quite true. This is a Google Pixel that's running an operating system called Graphene OS. And Graphene OS is a company, I think they're up in Toronto or somewhere in Canada, but it runs all your Android apps, but it does them in a different way. It runs them in what's called a sandbox. So they can't talk to each other. They can't sort of tell on you. So it's private. So I get the advantage. If you're on Android, you really ought to check out Graphene OS. Now, it's a little bit tough to get installed, but it's really worth it. I can use Google Maps, but Maps doesn't report back to Google, hey, Dave's doing this, and then he's doing that. So I get sort of the benefit of the big apps with mobile without being spied on all the time. I don't think I have to advocate for Bitcoin and Lightning. That's another open source. I'll pass over that. We include WireGuard, which is VPN software, on Federated, and it's kind of cool. I don't know if you knew this, Wyatt, but if you have a team, you can all dial into the VPN and you look like you're on a local network together, so you can print to each other's printers and watch each other's porn and just feel like you're having a great little LAN party. And then Vault Warden is the final one I want to highlight for passwords. Password managers are one of the biggest offenders of privacy, because you think about it, they really know you inside and out. And so the companies like 1Password, LastPass, they're either looking at your data, they're giving their data up to hackers. This has happened over and over with these jokers. And so having your own password manager is a key thing that you can do, for your own security and privacy. And Vault Warden is a great thing to check out and a great option. There are many, many more that you can talk about. And if you go to the website, and again, I'm not trying to pitch the company. This is either something that you're going to be interested in or not. But if you go to Federated.Computer, we have a whole list of all the different packages that we support. There are many, many others that are out there. My email is coming up, but reach out to me and just say, hey, what do you think of this? Or how would I run something like, maybe Plane for project management, or, other sorts of things that you might be interested in. I'd love to talk to you about that. So that's the quick ideas that I had. I don't know if anyone has questions or comments or condemnations, but I'd love to hear them. Thank you.
So the first question, federated computer, when you speak about, it's a physical device, or it's just software, or it's virtual machine? What it's actually, what you deliver? What do you deliver?
That's a great question. So again, I didn't want my talk to be about Federated per se, but I am from Federated. So we sell you what's called a Federated Core, which is a virtual machine. They're hosted in data centers, either in West Coast US, East Coast, Germany, or Singapore. You get to choose. And like I said, if you don't like our service, then we give you the virtual machine and you can run it yourself. The virtual machine is highly optimized, so all these packages are pre-installed and we run everything for you. So you don't need to be an IT professional to run this thing. It's run, it's backed up, we protect it from people coming in from off the internet trying to gain control of it. So you get the benefits of all the software, the open source software, but you don't have to be the IT services person. Now there's a key piece here, which is part of what the federated technology is we applied a little piece of technology called a macaroon that was actually invented at Google, but it's a little bit of security. It's like a security key that allows us to only manage the parts of the system that we need to manage, like the software, the backup, but we don't have access to your data. So we can't sell your data, we can't give your data to someone else, and we think that's really important. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Thank you for the talk, David. Excellent material. I'm curious, have you ever read the libertarian material on intellectual property? Any inspiration from that source, or did you discover it through being a technologist and sort of coming to those conclusions on your own?
That would be a whole different conversation. I wouldn't really classify myself as a libertarian per se. I'm sort of a classic European conservative, and I use the word European in the sense that I'm a big believer in common good ideas. I'm an American, and I like my individuality and my privacy and those sorts of things. So I'm a little bit of a mutt in that regard. Does that answer your question? I listen to Tom Woods, so I'm a podcast libertarian, I guess you'd say, and I've read Basquiat, Murray Rothbard, those sorts of folks. But I think, to be honest, for me, my business philosophy has always come from one company. It's called Southwest Airlines. I love Herb Kelleher. I love the fact that they capitalize the word customer, and I think customers come first. And I know that's something that is sort of said, but at Joint, at Federated, it's like we want to make sure that Wyatt, who's actually our customer, that he's happy and that he's getting value for his money. And if we give Wyatt value for his money, and that we respect Wyatt's sort of intentions when it comes to what we claim we're delivering, then I feel comfortable about that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I have two questions for you. And first off, I want to say thank you for your Warrior stack. I think I'm running everything on there. So I really appreciate it. Yeah, I'm not running Jitsi, but everything else. Okay. So my two questions are, one, what do you guys use for email? Because I saw on your website that you guys will host email for people. And then two, what is your underlying software? So are you guys AWS, Google Cloud, Proxmox? What are you doing?
Okay, to answer the first question, the last question first, we're just a Ubuntu virtual machine running Docker. So, and then we've done a lot of work to optimize all the packages so that they work well. Not to get in too far into the weeds as far as the technology, but we also have Power DNS and traffic, so we do a lot of work for sort of interfacing all the different pieces of software with each other from a technical and networking standpoint. And actually that's that's a big part of where if you're a self-hoster, you're going to have problems sort of making all that work, especially when it comes to a VPN, because then you have public-private networks and all sorts of other things that we've set up in there. Our software is not open source yet. At Joint, we did a lot of open sourcing. So one of the things we invented at Joint was Node.js. You may have heard of it. Node.js is one of the biggest frameworks that's out there on the web today. It was only the second framework not invented at Microsoft that shipped on Windows, the first one being Java. So I have a lot of experience doing open source projects. We're just not ready to do open source yet. We launched in May of last year, and frankly, it wouldn't be worth it to people to use this product as an open source product yet, but that will be happening. And I'm very intent on making sure that the federated stack can be used by other companies to build their own versions of federated. I think that's important to the ecosystem. As far as email goes, email is a very controversial topic these days. So Microsoft actually blocks a lot of inbound email from people that don't pay Microsoft $120,000 a year for the privilege of being able to deliver to Microsoft addresses. So there's a lot of work that small email providers, not just Federated, but a lot of people have to do to be able to deliver to Microsoft, not to show up in the spam inboxes of Gmail. Our email solution is Docker Mail, so it's the Docker image, and we use that as the basis for building an email server. But just because you stand up an email server that allows connections on IMAP and SMTP and all the rest of that, doesn't mean you're done as far as email. You've got to do DKIM and all the other things you have to do to make sure that you trap the spam, and there's a lot of spam out there on the internet still today. Make sure it's secure, make sure people can't spoof addresses and all the rest of it. And that's all part of the stuff that we've done ourselves. Am I answering your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Earlier in your talk, you said that you believe that a liberal arts education was a way to learn how to think.
Yes.
And I think under the Prussian model, like a lot of us would agree, but in a more pessimistic way.
Okay.
So I would love for you to elaborate upon that, like also as a person with a BA, but yeah.
I don't think you have to go to school, by the way, to get a liberal arts education. I think more and more, I've got two daughters. One of them's at University of Washington, the other's at Claremont College in California, and I think that their education is, in some ways, I could argue, a tremendous disservice to them. But just like Gmail, I guess we got to do it. So. But I think it's very important in a liberal education that you get a wide sort of ambit of different authors and readings and cultures, and that's what in classical Western liberal education you had a curriculum that not just allowed you to understand mathematics, but sort of the philosophy behind mathematics, logic, sort of how you think about art, how you think about beauty, how we think about concepts like truth, evil, good, these sorts of things. And not to get into them, but I think, for me, those are things that are very important to have, because then, when I go to build that new thing, that new tool in a scientific mode that's going to revolutionize driving or whatever, I have a bigger framework for sort of thinking about not just sort of fourth page Sunday New York Times ethics, but true ethics. What are my sort of responsibilities to my customer? What are my responsibilities to the city, to my family, and those sorts of things? What are my responsibilities as an employer? And these all come, not just from sort of 2-day HR seminars where I learned to become, more sensitive to DEI, but actually, reading things like the dialogues of Plato, the poetry of Pindar, etc. Did I answer your question? Thanks.
Okay. My question is, and maybe you already answered it, but it sounds like, I guess I want you to confirm my understanding and then also respond, but it sounds like that right now your monetization model is self-hosting as a service, and that you, as a result of how that's being executed on, you can then deny people access to what you're hosting for them. So let's say that they decide after 1 year that they're not going to pay you anymore, that they have lost access to their data. How do you think that that is long-term as good as hosting something yourself, should you have the opportunity to do so?
So just a couple clarifications. If someone doesn't pay, we reach out to them, we say, hey, you haven't paid. Guess what? We're paying for the service, so someone's got to pay for the service. So do you want the service? And most of the time, my experience has been they don't want the service. So it just sort of vanishes into the digital ether. But as I said, you know, the policy at Federated, and I think it's a customer-friendly policy, is if the customer wants the virtual machine, we give them the virtual machine. We have the capabilities of doing that. So we don't do paid-for self-hosting, and I'm just going to quibble with a little bit with the words because we don't allow our customers to run their virtual machine. We run it for them. And part of that is the machine learning that we have that allows us to sort of make sure that we're looking at all the inbound threats, that they have the right software, that things have been updated and patched. And we do that automatically through our provisioning platform. And the team at Federated mostly came from Joyent, and we have a lot of experience running very large-scale cloud infrastructure. So we think we're better than you doing it. And if you disagree, then we'll give you the keys, and you can go. You know, it's not really a fight. It's just sort of a preference of experience. Do you, you know? So it would be like, yeah, you can mow your own lawn. You can also hire me to mow your lawn. And as soon as you tell me to stop mowing your lawn, I won't show up and I won't mow your lawn. Does that make sense? So that's sort of the model here. And I don't think there's really a right way or a wrong way. It's just a question of what your capabilities are and what's convenient. You know, and I have the capability of running something like this, but my own infrastructure is run on Federated, just like every other customer's infrastructure. So to give you a little sense, you know, we run hundreds and thousands of customers today, and they trust us because they want privacy, they want better price, they want access to these open source tools, but they do not want to run it themselves. Am I answering your question? No. Yes. Oh.
Thank you, David. Awesome presentation. I am a customer, haven't coded a thing in my life, never self-hosted anything, trying to be less of a digital hypocrite. So it's like customer support has been awesome. Highly recommend. You mentioned, you know, your husband and father. How have you been able to like convince your family or run your household on an open source standard?
Huh. That's a funny one because my wife, she has a Sunday FaceTime call with her family every week. And over Christmas, I showed them Federated, and I said, and yeah, it's just like I got rejected. So I have work to do, you know. And, you know, famously, you know, this is the thing is sometimes, you know, the artist is rejected by his family. I guess I don't know what else to say. That's pretentious, I'm sorry. But it's a tough thing. And so, you know, but open source is not about violence. It's about options. And we went through some of the options here. You know, for me, I started off with POP and with Nextcloud. And I began to sort of think through for myself. I was like, these are really good. I'm actually getting my work done, and this is not too, you know, this is not a net negative for me. So I began to explore more. So I think I don't want to oversell it because at the end of the day, you know, I'd rather be up in the mountains and doing other sorts of things than just constantly focused on technology. But you know, we have to live in the digital world, and these are opportunities for people to choose as they feel comfortable. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, thank you. My second question is my stepbrother is a software engineer for Google, and when I was mentioning to him that I wanted to switch and run my company on an open source standard, he posed it as Microsoft and Google being capitalistic softwares, and they employ a lot of people to continue developing and being on the cutting edge of software development, whereas open source is more community driven and kind of like socialist software. Just curious of what you think of that framing, and if you have any ammunition that you could give me to come back at him in that argument.
Well, I would say we have to make a distinction, and I don't want to get over my skis here as far as, I'm not an economist, but it seems like there's the capitalist that is sort of the one-way capitalist that's just going to absorb all the light in the room, all the energy, and it's just like a big fat pig, maybe like something from 1984, Animal Farm. And then there's this sort of capitalist that understands that actually when I offer you a benefit that helps you, it's going to help me because we're all going to sort of move forward together. And I don't know that that's socialism as much as sort of enlightened self-interest in a way. And so companies like Microsoft and Google's done a tremendous amount of open sourcing certain things, and the same is true for Microsoft. Amazon has been, has done some open sourcing, but it tends to be more positioned as sort of what can help them trap more people into their ecosystem. And I could give examples here, but I know at Joint, we found out, at Joint we developed something called Manto, which was sort of one of the first database file storage providers. And Amazon just sort of sucked that up, provided the service, and they were not following the license. There's an open source license. They were supposed to contribute back all of their code back to the central repository. They weren't doing that, and our lawyers went to them, and they said, "You're not doing this." And the response was sort of, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" It's like, well, not much. I mean, you're Amazon, and we're this little company. So I think, at the end, I come back to this idea of, that code is speech, and speech should be free, and we should be all sort of understanding that it's not the speech that's the value, it's the relationship that the two of us have together and our ability to exchange ideas. And I know that sounds like butterflies and daisies, but I really believe that in my experience that when we have that sort of relationship, whether it's between vendor and customer or peers or colleagues, that life is just better.
Do you have your own data center, or you use, or you're renting somebody else?
We use a German company called Hetzner for most of the data centers, and then we use another company called Vultr, V-U-L-T-R, for our Asian data center. Hetzner is spelled H-E-R-T-Z.
I use them, I know.
Yeah. They're a big sort of commodity data center. For us, it doesn't really matter we're not looking for extra services. We just need virtual machines and machines that are reliable.
Okay, thank you.
2 or 3 more questions.
Do you guys have anything, or do you know of any software that's similar to like Vivint or Ring, but open source, and you can control such as like a security system for your house or property or whatever?
Yes, and it starts with home, and I'm spacing. Home Assistant, yeah. So we don't do something like that, but there are 2 good companies you should check out. One of them is called Umbral, and the other is Start9. And they both sell little boxes that you can put in to your home, and you can run Home Assistant on both of them. I like Umbral. Start9 is actually a Denver company, so it's, if you want to support local. The reason these are different than us is, first of all, it's a box that you have to care and feed, and you're still the systems administrator for both of those systems. But Home Assistant is a good one. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Two pieces of software that I'm looking for and operating. One is for audio conversion. I've had problems or challenges discovering what might be the. Say again?
Sound juicer? I mean, is that what, like, you just need to convert file formats?
Yeah, so I'm trying to use Audacity, but it wants me converting files before I put them in there. So the converter itself.
I don't know if there's a, I'm assuming you're probably on Windows or
Yeah.
whatever. I don't know. I mean, I use it on the Bluetooth. We'll follow up.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a bunch. I'm not a big. I apologize. I'm not a big sound person.
Okay, so then this just goes into the second.
But there are a ton, and he's mentioning some. I think VLC. Someone mentioned VLC does some sound conversion. It also does video. FFmpeg does a lot of that work too. There's another one that I'm missing that's specifically like sound. So just send me an email to David at Federated.Computer, and I can run this down for you.
Thank
I think
you.
it's yeah.
Last question. All right, that's our talk. Give it up for David.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out. We will be back in 3 weeks. Corey Hughes will be here, and we will be talking about the JFK assassination. So drive safe, have a good night, and keep fighting the state.